who knows, with all that rain that fell like it were spring, also we are at the end of May, we might get a few grazing sessions out of all that rain. Because here, where we initially wanted to seed, that is CT2, there is a lot of forage that came up in a natural way. Of course, this will not last all summer, but it probably is a session. And in our zone A, it's also greening up everywhere. So I'm hopeful that now when the sun comes out, and the forecast now says cloudy and sun, this might then actually happen. So to us, this is kind of a blessing. So that is a very good thing, because we have been keeping them alive with pellets and straw, but in a very rationed way, so just the minimum, and a few days of actual grazing, green grass, would be very helpful. And keep in mind, once the calves are old enough, so when they are a year old, we will sell them and also then select who gets to stay and who needs to leave. So we still have the bull there, and as soon as someone wants to buy this guy, he will go together with 3 others that are old enough and have not become pregnant because they're too small, and they will leave. And then when everybody else is not needing the milk from the cow anymore, they will then also go, because we said we are going to reduce this and we are not continuing with cattle ranching. We plant trees instead. So this is going to happen, but I think we will keep a few cows. So basically we pick the most docile ones and use them in a very controlled way, and when there is no forage, then they will be kept in a newly constructed open barn, which basically is a roof made of solar panels, by the way. And underneath that there will be deep bedding of straw, so that they make compost for us, and later we put the pigs in and then have a lot of nutrients for the trees that we are going to plant. So there's that. So most of them will be gone, but a few, those who understood the fencing and are easy to manage. 5516 is a good example. She's a very big cow, but smart. She will stay, and we will select a few others. All these limousine cows that are the contrary of docile, they will go, because they are very hard to control and pretty stupid also. They do whatever comes to their mind, and that is usually running away and running down a fence and stuff like that. So we will get rid of them. But the good ones, maybe 5, 6, something like that, a small herd, we will keep, and no bull. So that's the plan for the future in about a year. So after a lot of rain, you guys want to see how the swales look like. So here's the little pond that has a clay lining underneath. It's natural in CT01, where the cows are. You can see them there. And that is how it looks like here at the beginning. There is a drip irrigation line that we used to keep some vetiver around, but that failed. It wasn't planted in the right way. So we need to do this again. And for those who are new, we will not do this in the very near future. And that drip irrigation line will also go, because watch that video about the new approach. This is out of scope. So this is an area that is not close to the compound, and it will have to wait. The compound is down there. Currently we fix things in the compound and make it nice and plant stuff there. 48 new trees, for example, all palovnias, but native ones will follow. And then we will take care of the area immediately around the compound, and then around that area and around that area and so on. And eventually we will come here. And when we come here, we will then plant a lot of stuff. And in the meantime, what nature has in stock can grow. It's not that much, as you can see. That berm is pretty empty. And we tried to bring out some beans and stuff like that. And there's also straw with manure on it, but no seed means nothing grows. Around here it looks a little bit better, and for those new, I need to mention we tried to seed Sunhemp and Friends here, but the bags came in too late because of a strike. And this year, when we had the bags in time, there was no rain, and so we decided not to risk it. Of course, had we known that these weeks we get a lot of rain, we could have seeded, but instead all this told us we better focus on the compound, and the seed comes in handy there, as you can see in many of the recent videos, and probably in the next one as well. So this is also out of scope. This will have to wait until we come here, and then we will make this full of trees. And imagine in that space between the oak trees there is a lot of room for additional trees. So let me mention this number again. My plan is to have 400 palovnia trees per hectare between the 40 oak trees per hectare that exist, and the remaining space will be filled with native species and shrubs. So trees and shrubs. And while the palovnias are small, they come first, that's for a reason. We will bring out sunhemp, sunflower and a little bit of corn for biomass, so the first year. And then later I hope to be able to do this with Life Terra EU. Then we will plant in between the palovnias, with irrigation in place for the first 2 or 3 years, native trees and shrubs, so that eventually all this area is a very dense forest. You can't walk from one end to the other without cutting down things to make a path, because there will be so many trees and shrubs that it's impossible to pass, and that's precisely the idea. And when all that has grown a little bit, we will then reintroduce animals, and it's going to be poultry first. Wild things are a little bit small and a little bit fragile, but eventually we will use pigs and start the dehesa again. And the idea is to manage this closely so that we never overdo it. So the pigs should disturb and do a little bit of damage, but not too much, just enough so that nature can work, and then they move on, because all these oak trees, the encinas, they produce acorns, and of course the pigs will go after them, and then we move them, which is also why we keep the fencing as much as it exists, and add even more fencing so that we have zones that we can control. And by fencing I mean fencing like that, a little bit nicer and more as a straight line, but this type of fencing has served us well, even if it's not perfect. So this of course is a project over many years, because you plant this amount of trees not in a few weeks. So there is a lot of things, but it's basically now agroforestry, or yeah, it's agroforestry basically, or you can call it silvopasture. There are different terms for this. So it's basically a forest, and inside of that forest we do certain activities, and those activities are designed in order to help the forest and not damage it. So basically the original idea of a dehesa. And here is the other pond in that swale. You can see a little bit of water, but this will evaporate or sink in, so this won't last very long. And I would also think that the cows come here to drink from it. Also, there is a waterer somewhere there behind the tree. Actually, it's over there, but you can see it probably. Let me zoom in to show you this better. So there is an animal waterer, and it's fed via a pump from the outflow of the water reservoir. So when there's sunshine like right now, this gets water, and when the pump is not able to move the water up here, then this is what they are left with. It's better than nothing, and it's a pretty natural way. But we have one thing that we need to do. There are two pipes that run up the hill all the way to there, and up there there's a 3000 liter tank, and the idea is that when the pump is active, it maintains that 3000 liter tank full, and then by gravity the water comes down, and it should then go to this waterer. Of course, 3000 liters won't last a long time. Cows, when they are thirsty, they drink a lot, but when they drink most, it is also sunny, so that deposit up there should then be refilled. And we treat it like an irrigation target, so we estimate it takes about 3 hours or maybe 4. So that's like irrigating something, but in this case it's filling up that tank up there. And I say this because we use an application that I made and continue to modify and improve. That application calculates for how much time we can irrigate or move water from a well to a certain target. And a target can be something in the garden where we say, let's irrigate this for 30 minutes, or let's irrigate the vetiver in A5 for an hour via sprinkler, or let's pump up water up the hill for 3 hours. And during that time, that's the only thing that happens. So we control the use of a well so that we don't deplete it. And of course I would love to know something about the volume that is moved, but for that I need to have some flow sensors where I can actually count it. That will come. I'm very eager to do this, but I need to learn a few things and also purchase the necessary equipment. Alone the LoRaWAN gateway is a little bit more than €1,000, plus I need a server here on site, which is another 2,000, and then of course I need to find the time and get acquainted with all the open source that is involved. I'm very eager to start this, but one thing at a time, and when the resources for that are available. But then it will be fully automated, and then I have data, and then I know what the capacity of the well is, and then my software can calculate how much we can pump out of it and stuff like that. So that's going to be very interesting. And it is also very important, once we have a lot of young trees here, that way we know how much capacity we have to irrigate them during a dry summer, because that is when they grow, and that then determines how much we can plant. So this is all somehow connected, and it makes more sense in this situation here than to try the same thing over and over and over again. So when you run into an obstacle, you need to take a step back and figure out, okay, why am I having a problem? And has what I have been doing had a positive impact or not? So even if it stays the same, maybe you want to try something else. So I observed, I draw this conclusion, and as I drew the conclusion, I decided we are going to focus now on trees and do this outward from the compound. So first the compound, and then zone by zone around it. And eventually in 10 years we can then harvest a lot of palovnia trees and maybe a few others. I need to figure out what other species that has market value for wood and grows fast also. We can then harvest, and that is when then there's some revenue. And in between those 10 years, well, I need to continue financing this thing. It's an investment, and maybe we can find some co-investors. Could be you guys on a smaller scale, and that way we create a lot of biomass, a lot of fertility, a lot of shade, and eventually this comes back to as it was once was. So my hope. And now that I'm here, I'm going to show you the swale, the second one. There are swale-like structures up there, but I know the water gets into them and then disappears, so I can't show you a full swale there. Those are just trenches to slow the water down, but it has a positive effect. And let's see. So here we have some standing water. That is the Sudan grass. Looking down, there is no standing water, but I think I see a shimmer of some water there in that pond area. But let's look at the other side first. So it is definitely quite moist. Yeah, see, there is some standing water. And here there is even more. So this is all from the rain that we had. But by far it was not enough to really fill up those swales. And of course the ground was very, very dry. So whatever fell down got immediately absorbed. And that's good, because we want to have this water bubble below the swale. So in here and below and further down there is this water bubble, and that water bubble is responsible for all these plants there. So that is the function of a swale on a slope. So that basically the water gets caught here and then stored underground. It forms a bubble and these grasses tapped into it. So that is very beautiful and it works as intended. So a full swale is not really what you want. This is just on day one after the rain. And then the water should infiltrate and be used, given that there are enough plants. And also here we had some beans and brought out straw and all this for biomass, but you see, that is simply not enough. So the trees are the solution, because also they are small because they got attacked by the animals. They scratched on them. Yeah, you see here, this tree would have been a lot taller now, but some cow used it as a scratching pole and broke off a few pieces, but these palovnias come back. So even this is a small one, it has roots and will definitely survive without irrigation. There is a drip irrigation line, but we will remove this because all these trees have now roots that go deep enough, and if we maintain moisture via or in the swale, they can definitely use it. So there is no need for a drip irrigation. And like I said, we will not actively work outside the compound and outside the immediately area for the time being. And this has to wait. So whatever wheat is able to establish itself here, a pioneer species, is more than welcome, but we will only observe and not put any work or resources into this. So these trees are now independent, so that has worked out well. And I'm trying to get to the other part where there's a very big one. I'm approaching it, and you see I'm walking here on stones, and now The ground is a little bit soft, but it is still sand and stones. So we need to do quite a lot. We will, but not at this time. So here's one that is pretty tall. That is the tallest one, I think. And this is not yet as tall as the oak trees around, but not much is missing. And let me show you a detail. So here the trunk, you can see my hand, that is the size of it. Of course at the bottom it is thicker. And we did not prune it or did anything as we are supposed to when we plant them for wood. But you can see how it looks, and you see it also sprouts from the bottom. And I let it because this is here forever. This is in the middle of that berm, and its purpose is biomass in form of the leaves when they fall, and here and there maybe we make wood chips out of a branch or so, but it is there for biomass and for shade. So that is not to be maintained the same way as we would a tree for wood. And those here, they are the same. That they are sitting on the edge of the berm. Of course, they might become more bush-like, more like a shrub instead of a tall tree. But again, I am more than happy for every bit of biomass that grows, and for the ones that will be planted at some point in the empty spaces between the oaks for wood, and it's a totally different thing. So they will be under a different management scheme. And I also like to see things for myself first, and with a very fast growing tree like this, that actually works out. So basically these trees, they tell me how these trees behave. I don't like to copy someone else. Instead, I like to understand things at my side, and that is usually a much better approach than to copy someone else's method or approach or form of organization. So just to make a little detour, there's this Swedish company Spotify, and a lot of companies want to copy the Spotify model, where they then organize their teams in the same way as Spotify did, and then they fail because they copy what Spotify has created as a emergent model that works for them in their particular setting and with their people. And you cannot simply be a copycat and then expect to be successful. You have to develop those things for yourself. And I think the same goes for the development of a piece of land. So you need to do some experiment and fail and learn. And don't do this if you can't afford it. So if you need to make a living, that is not what you should be doing. And that's very unfortunate, but yeah, there is that. So I prefer to not copy, but learn. That's deeper learning. And here you see a little bit of that integrated pond area. It's not full by any means, but some of the plants that we also have in the outflow of the water reservoir, they're very common for this area. Locally they're called hunku. They also showed up. And that is also the things that are around the other pond, the big one that we dug. It's not vetiver, it's a native. And it likes to have wet feet. Yeah, so like I said, it is better to learn what works at your place, and everything else what you can see all around is very helpful, but it's for inspiration. It is not to be copied literally. So here in this case, it is okay that they grow like they naturally grow. There is no need to remove leaves and branches and all that, just in order to have a very tall and nice trunk for wood, because they are not for wood. So here we can afford to let it grow and to observe and understand. And what people in plantations have figured out that we can then use when we plant trees for commercial purpose in those areas. And we can use the knowledge from this experiment and then be a little bit better with that. Because there's also the question of irrigation and all that. And in a plantation, you focus everything on that and you calculate everything and you install it like a factory. And that goes a little bit against the overall goal, because this is an ecosystem restoration project, first and foremost. It is not meant to be a business in the short term. It should be one in the long term, because I'm looking for some passive income, but the main point there is passive. So if I want to build a business, then I need to be personally involved. That is what I do every day. And here this is a little bit different. So I'm trying to figure out the lazy way so that the system works for itself and does not require my input every day. And also, I should probably mention that also, I have my IT stuff, and right now it's a little bit on pause because there is some sort of recession apparently going on, but this will pick up again, and that is what my focus should be on, because it makes a lot more sense than trying to live off of agriculture. It is a lot easier to do this in IT than something else. But never put all eggs in the same basket. So that is why I like this to work and be productive at some point, but not in the form of an exploitation. So I'm not here to squeeze every bit out of the land and the workers and the animals. That is not who I am. So if I wanted to be like that, I would run a factory, and that is something that I don't want to do. I know other things, and I don't have to, thankfully. So this is a model system to teach us something, and then what we can learn and observe here, especially during these special times with the drought, that is very helpful. So, to be applied. This here, what I just found in the middle of CT2, is a very pleasant surprise. This stump of an oak tree is resprouting. So, in 100 years, we have another oak here, based on the root system of the old one. So that is very, very nice to see. If you let them, they try to survive. Which is also why I don't like to cut all the sprouts at the bottom of an oak tree. Because my understanding is the tree wants to rejuvenate and recreate itself when there is problems based on drought and abuse and all this. So I rather let the tree figure out a way to survive and make sure that a part of it will be around in a couple 100 years, instead of managing things based on some recommendation that are rooted and for the purpose of exploiting natural resources. I understand that, but as this is not the main goal, then why do it? So I rather follow the lead of nature, what nature wants to tell me, instead of looking for a short-term benefit during my very limited human lifespan. That's my philosophy regarding that. And here is another discovery in CT2. This is Bermuda grass, and it's a natural occurrence. It is from here, and with that rainfall and now the sun that will be followed if summer starts, this is great, because that soil here is now a lot looser than it was before. We have received a lot of moisture, and now the sun will help this plant It grows very, very well at 35 centigrades, and that's precisely the summer temperature that we typically have. So it has now the right conditions. And this is supposed to be summer forage here in this area, but it has almost been eliminated everywhere because too much grazing and in a non-controlled fashion, which is the main problem. So the too much is a function of keeping the animals for too long in the same place. So if you do set stocking, 100 cows on 100 hectares, it's not that much, it's just 1 cow per hectare. But if you let them roam the whole place unrestricted, of course, when there's nothing else, they will go after every bit of green, and therefore no bit of green will then grow. So that's the problem. And when you keep them away, and are a little bit lucky, like we are with the rain now, then these things come back. And the Bermuda grass originally came from this area. And that is why we should protect it a little bit. Not in the sense that we keep animals completely away, it needs grazing, but managed it. So let it express itself and then come with a herd, graze it, and then be away for a certain amount of time, and then you can come back. So the disturbance by the mules with that shallow plow, more like a harrow actually, so only the first few centimeters got affected, that was helpful for this. So the existing seed were able to germinate. And now we have Bermuda grass here. It is also in the other areas. There are spots here and there. So if this continues, it will be full of it. And that is what I'm hoping for. But then of course this at some point will be a dense forest. But this will survive and then come back once the forest gets cleared by the pigs, like what they did in the very, very past. And see, just a few meters away from the spot where I talked first, there's more, and it has grown taller. So this is now perfect conditions for this. So instead of sun hemp, it appears we are going to have Bermuda grass here, which would be extremely nice because it belongs to this area.